Shabbat Shalom again.
Shabbat Shalom.
So, if you have been here for the past couple weeks, you likely know that we find ourselves in a period of time in the Jewish calendar leading us up to the High Holy Days. If you didn't know that, if you go to North Shore Congregation Israel, you probably received a high holiday catalog in the mail. So in case you missed the whole month of Elul thing, there is the more mundane, make sure you get your passes kind of thing to prepare for these upcoming high holy days. As it happens, this month of Elul, and really the truth of the matter is from Tisha B'Av, in the early part of the month of Av, up through the high holy days, our tradition invites us into a period of introspection, reflection, cheshbon hanefesh, soul inventory taking, all with the intention of really taking quite serious, depending on how you understand it, the demand of or the invitation of the high holy days, the Yomim Noraim, the days of awe. And that is nothing less than teshuvah, the returning to the best of who one can be, or the opportunity to become completely new. And you don't have to buy anything to do that. You don't have to drink some sort of weird liquid. You don't have to eat certain types of food. All you have to do is look inside. Guess what's easier? Yeah. Wouldn't you rather there be an infomercial or something that said, like, interested in personal transformation? Buy this new beverage. I don't know how many of us would buy it, but I know I would. Because if we take seriously the invitation or the demand, we know that that requires an honest seeing, not of others, about whom we tend to have 20/20 vision all the time, but into ourselves, where our vision is often quite obscured. And so this period of time invites us to take off those obscured lenses and look in deeply. But it doesn't give us, it doesn't leave us on our own to do that. The tradition, in fact, offers us roadmaps along the way, and they come in the form of various customs, and in particular, the Torah portions of each week in the month of Elul in particular literally offer us a practice that we can do. And by we can do, I mean we can do it. It is doable, in which to engage, that can help us to see clearly if we want. Now, you don't have to want, of course, but the opportunity is a pretty great one. So I'd like to offer you a little bit of insight into this week's opportunity. This week's Torah portion is called Ki Tetzei. This Torah portion is probably most famous because it contains the greatest number of mitzvot, or commandments. You want to come say it? Yeah. Come on, Dahlia. It's Dahlia's Torah portion. She's the morning bat mitzvah tomorrow. And we didn't even prep this, right? We didn't talk about this. Yes. How many mitzvot?
72.
High fives. Mazel tov. You're a bat mitzvah. Right? Over 70 commandments contained in one single Torah portion. The second largest catalog of mitzvot is Parshat Mishpatim in the book of Exodus, and it only gets us around 40. Right? So this is a lot. And of note of these many, many, many commandments is nearly all of them focus around the subject of one person in relation to another. They're intra-human commandments. So why might that be an important frame, first of all, for us to consider at this time of year as we approach the high holidays? What are the high holidays concerned about? Are they concerned about our relationship with God? Well, I'm trying to give you the answer with my tone. No, good, correct. They are, in fact, most concerned with our relationships with one another. And you perhaps remember, as we read in the Machzor, right? For sins of one person against another, Yom Kippur does not atone until one person atones with the other. You're not good with God till we're good with each other. And Yom Kippur is the April 15th, as it were, to do the work we need to do. Because we know if we didn't have a deadline, we might just still be waiting for that infomercial to come and take it all away. Among the many, many, many commandments that Ki Teitze offers is one category expressed through 4 different commandments. And it's a category that tradition comes to know as Hashavat Avedah, the returning of the lost. This is a potentially familiar category because it's also explained in Parshat Mishpatim. But I want to just read you, word for word in English translation, these 4 verses. And I'll let you just sort of think to yourself about them, all right? So here's what they say. If you see your neighbor's ox or sheep going astray, do not ignore it. You must take it back to your neighbor. If your neighbor doesn't live near you, by neighbor here, it doesn't mean the person who lives near you. It means your fellow. If your neighbor doesn't live near you or you do not know who they are, you need to bring it home, and it shall remain with you until your fellow or your neighbor claims it. Enjoy that. Ox and sheep. And then when they come to claim it, you have to give it back to them. You have to do the same with their donkey. You have to do the same with their garment. So shall you do with anything that your fellow loses and you find. You must not ignore it. If you see your fellow's donkey or ox fallen on the road, do not ignore it. You must help them lift it up. If you see something that belongs to somebody else, we're going to leave it at that, because raise your hand if you've got an ox or a donkey. I don't know about you. I got a dog. I got 2, actually. You have an ox or a donkey, Mark? Oh, a dog, right, exactly. Right, so if you see something that belongs to someone else, what are you obligated to do? Say it again, I couldn't hear. Keep it, care for it, return it. And if you see something that belongs to someone else that's damaged, what are you obligated to do? Help them fix it. Literally lift it up with them. And what are you not allowed to do? Repeated it 3 times. Ignore it. Lo tuchal tit alem is the Hebrew. You cannot, you should not be able to, lahit alem, ignore it. That's the colloquial translation of that word. But I want to ask you a question. And so you're probably not super into Hebrew, but the root of lahit alem is a word you might know. And that word is olam. Does anybody know what the word olam means? Yeah, Oizy. It means world. Thank you, Chicagoland Jewish Day School. That's worth the tuition right there. Okay, so olam means world. And in a Hebrew verb, when you hear verbs that have the sound heat or yeet, and you know that yeet sound probably because of the Kaddish, that's actually Aramaic, not Hebrew, but in mainstream Hebrew, when you hear words that sound yeet, have that beginning the form of a word, it's reflexive, okay? So, meaning you must not do the thing to yourself. So, what does lahit alem really mean? It means you must not make a world of yourself. Now, why would it be that ignoring something that belongs to someone else would equate to you making a world of yourself. It's not a rhetorical question. Yeah, Mark. Because if you are not ignoring, it takes you out of yourself and you are giving toward others. Whereas if you ignore something that is of someone else's, you are fully self-sufficient. You are all you. And how does that tend to work out for us? Can we really do it by ourselves? If we could, there would be no Yom Kippur, there would be no Rosh Hashanah, there would be no collective, communal, anything. It would just be us alone in the world. And that tends not to satisfy. But I want to let you in on a little bit of insight, because if this was just about returning lost objects, we could still say, well, what does that really have to do with these high holy days? Like, how often do I get the opportunity to find my neighbor's wandering sheep or iPhone on the ground and then hold on to it until they can come and claim it? So this is where the beautiful insight of the Hasidic lens comes in Judaism. It says that these lost objects are not actually objects, they are people. They are the lonely, the isolated, those that don't fit into whatever it is that we understand as those whom we'd be comfortable being with, the suffering, the sick, the difficult among us. And if we bring it back to the obligation of the Parsha, this mitzvah, what are we not allowed to do? Ignore them. Because if we ignore them, we not only make a world of ourselves in which they are not a part, but we actually do the same thing to them. And I probably don't need to say what happens when that becomes what we are accustomed to. As we all know, those sorts of stakes are very, very high. Our tradition would say everything rides on that. Which is why, at this time of year, when we're invited to look deep inside ourselves, one of the questions this week invites us to ask is, who am I ignoring? Who am I choosing not to see? Because they're there. Ignoring means we actually know they're there. We're just pretending like we don't see them. And that's a difficult question. So what are the stakes? Of note is at the end of the Torah portion this week is a reference back to something called Amalek. Do you remember Amalek? The ultimate enemy of the Jewish people. We learned about Amalek earlier in the Torah, but this week, the conclusion, the Maftir portion in this Torah portion tells us why they're so problematic. And the reason is why they are the ultimate enemy of the Jewish people to the extreme is because they attacked the vulnerable knowingly and intentionally. They ignored the most vulnerable around them, and that now allowed them to annihilate them. It's no different today. But our command is never to forget, blotting out the memory of Amalek from our Hasidic frame within us. This tendency we have to overlook the vulnerable, not to see them, to avert our eyes. The other thing I want to point out to you, though, in terms of, so what's the return, right? So what is the return if we don't ignore? Do we get elevated to heaven when Yom Kippur ends? Nah, it's just going to be the day after Yom Kippur. And if we're lucky, we'll do it again for the next year and the next and the next, right? Judaism doesn't give us sort of the, oh, and it's all good forever. We're consistently working and working toward betterment of our souls, refinement of the best of who we can be. But the ultimate opportunity is those words of take it back to your fellow, return it to your fellow. Those words are all the repetition, hashev, tashiv. And do you hear a familiar word in there? Teshuvah, hashev, tashiv, shuv, teshuvah. So if you wanted to know where the hidden Torah formula is for the achieving of ultimate teshuvah, it comes with returning lost objects to the people around us. It comes with not ignoring those that we really tend to be pretty comfortable ignoring. And the saving of our souls, which is what's at stake, is as simple as a choice to keep our eyes closed or open them. Because if we see, then we are forced to be in relationship. And the individual separated worlds are no longer isolated, but we become responsible for one another. And we can lift each other up out of that brokenness. But only if we see. Shabbat Shalom.